Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to some more Starbase. So let's go into here. So I'm just putting up another video of this Scarlet's little bloody journey of discovery inward, figuring this game out. It seems that some people are getting value from what I'm doing here. I don't purport to be a tutorial dude or a super expert or anything like that. I'm just a guy kind of documenting his travels in this game, and I obviously have a very keen interest in the blueprinting component and making solutions to problems, that sort of stuff. So I guess I'll just show you where I'm at the moment. I have slowed down a little bit on this because there's been a lot of releases, and it's almost like I have a channel to run or something like that. The most recent thing that I am working on is the Ned Kelly. Oh, the microcube, actually. Let's have a look at that real quickly. This was something I was sort of theorizing. I thought, you know, in all good sort of limbo terminology, how low can you go and how small can we go for the cubes? And so I haven't really done much here, but something I was sort of theorizing on was with solar panels. What's going on here? The beams are hidden? Yeah, so I was starting to make something here. Funnily enough, the propellant tank's probably going to be the biggest limiter. At first I thought the thruster size of the box and the triangle thruster might be the sort of lowest ceiling for size and dimensions, but I think you could probably make something, not necessarily for super long travel, but just to potter around a station for the memes, purely running on maneuver thrusters. I mean, you'd probably want them in multiple directions so you can actually steer, but these are the solar panels. I believe 2 solar panels can run one triangular thruster, but they're not always going to be guaranteed to have access to the sun. So I think you'd want to make the entire surface of the thing out of solar panels, because I refuse to build in anything but cubes, and then perhaps try and come up with a system where you maybe superimpose thrusters onto onto the solar panel in some way. Now, they're not really designed to go flush, and I'd probably need a hard point, and then you'd need room behind the hard point, so maybe you'd have like a double wall section, but then of course you're obstructing some of the solar panel. Yeah, so that was something I was sort of playing with a little bit, and I thought, I'd be curious if anyone has any thoughts around that. But that's just purely an experiment. It's just prototyping, seeing what I can get away with. I did think about making a solar paneled ship, or at least a solar supplement ship, because the panels actually do, like I said, one thruster, which is absolutely reasonable propulsion, especially if you're making a smaller ship, and 2 panels. Now, like I said, they won't always cover it, but yeah, if you came up with maybe a better energy storage solution, or even huge battery banks perhaps, you might actually be able to come up with a functional ship that can go, you know, essentially, well, maybe a hybrid. I wouldn't say fully solar, but I think you could really come up with something. Anyway, so we're going to have a look at my attempt at a fighter craft that I've just started, so it's very early in development, and I'm calling it the Ned Kelly because it informs the design. You'll see. Another thing is, I've been thinking about the sort of idea of, I might be able to show you on another design. I've come up with I've started to understand how the throttling of fuel consumption goes. Sorry, I was losing my words there. Or conversion is what I was really looking for. And I think it wouldn't take much to write a pretty rudimentary YOLO code script that would not necessarily turn, like, you can do it manually with the starter ship, where you can turn the engine off to make it go onto battery and then turn it back on. Now, the problem with that is that the way that the fuel rod and the generator conversion of fuel works is that they walk up incrementally, 1 tick at a time. I think it's 1 per second, and there's not much you can do about that. So if you start it from a cold start, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, and that number that it's at is a percentage multiplier on its efficiency, right? So there's going to be a difference between when it gets to 10 and when it gets to 30. But what you could do is go into the engine and set the upward limit to something lower. So you could hypothetically say it was running at 30 ticks. you could go to 20 and it will cap it down to there. And then if you type 30, it will walk back up from 20. So my point is, instead of using the button like in the starter ship where you reset it to 0 to walk back up to like 100, maybe you could have a throttle that goes down to 90 and back up to 100. And I think you could have an automated for loop that would do that as well. So you could basically go, if battery is full, then lower max by 1 point and then loop. And then I suppose else would be increased by 1 point. So as soon as it detects that the battery is full, the engine will start throttling itself 1 point per cycle, and you could probably make that up to 4 seconds the way that it works in YOLO code, but you could do it much quicker as well. So you could have an ultra responsive throttling, and that would respond to like weapon loads on the system and all that. Like all of a sudden, if you're putting more load on and the batteries are draining out, then it would scale up. Yeah, I think I'll work on that as well. But I thought I was going to have a look at this. This is more about a design discussion. So yeah, I'm calling this the Ned Kelly because I'm making a Ned Kelly front. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the guns. At the moment, I'm putting them internal, but I don't actually see the huge harm in putting them external. At first, I was like, maybe I want to protect their components from damage. But to be honest, the guns, like if I made a tier list of the most important things not to get busted on my ship, the guns would be at the bottom, right? You just run away if you've lost your fighting capacity. The issue is that I'm potentially going to do an entire wall of thrusters, and they create a corrosion thing. I don't know if the corrosion's implemented yet, but we're still going to build as if it is, because, I mean, it's going to get added. It's been made pretty clear. So anyway, so the idea is we're going to have our main thrust in the back, potentially one of these, but we could mirror it, right? And this wall I will mirror. I'll also put it at the top and the bottom as well. So the magical thing about the way that engines work in this game, it doesn't take much to set them up and get the computer to go, okay, cool, I'm pressing this button, this engine goes. But you don't actually say, these are all for roll or yaw or anything like that, because the flight computer helps geolocate all your propulsion systems onto your ship, right? So if I have a flight computer, let's have a look. In fact, I'd be using an advanced one because I want this to strafe. In fact, that's a big part of why I have that wall. So I'll get to that in a minute. But if we go to devices, is it control? No. Oh yeah, it would be not the main flight computer. What I'm talking about is the control unit. But I probably want the advanced one because your pitch roll, backwards and forwards movement and strafing, right? So that's what we want. You can see here, those arrows indicate the forward position of your ship, and whether this is upside down or not identifies the roof, as it were, right? So we basically put it into this ship like so, right? So we'll plug that in somewhere, who knows, who cares. And what will happen then is when I sit in the pilot's seat and I tell it I want to go forward, backward, I want to roll, whatever, it'll send it to this computer, which will combine, I'm saying go up, down, pitch, whatever, with the fact that it has essentially an origin point for the facing and the facing of the ship as a whole. And then this sends it into the main flight computer, which then sends it to the engines. And the engines will then be smart enough to interpolate what I'm asking. So if I'm standing on the I want to pitch to the right, what it will do in a graduating combination, it'll probably put a shitload of power in these ones, a little bit in these, and like none in that. And then on the opposite side, it'll probably put the front ones too, right? And then it might even put a little bit in the booster in the back to make it twist and like yaw to the right. So I hope I'm explaining myself. Essentially, because at first blush, you would think you'd have to explain to the computer programming code, and you would in most code. You'd have to explain what each thruster does and its function, its percentages and all that. Not at all in this. It can actually take your key inputs and recognize the strength of them and interpolate that into engine propulsion. So what does that mean and what can we do with that? Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to cover this thing in thrusters, this entire wall, the entire side here, and the top and bottom, because that will cover roll, right? Because roll would be twisting. Pitch will be up and down, so the top and bottom will cover that fine, and yaw, so that'll cover it. I also want a strafe, so these entire wall sections would help, and probably up and down would help a lot as well. So essentially, the sort of cylindrical, you know, just around that dimension of walls would be more than enough to have all degrees of freedom, apart from general propulsion, which will be in the back. And in the front, we won't actually need anything. So, and the reason for putting all these walls is to give me as much bloody oomph as possible, especially for strafing. The hope is that if by building it this way, this thing's gonna strafe like a fucking fiend, right? So, the idea is you cruise along, this thing can strafe like crazy and probably outmaneuver anything in its class, and absolutely anything bigger than it. And if you actually watch videos of people PvPing and pirate fighting and all that, everyone is still very, very obsessed with moving and maneuvering and fighting in an earthbound atmospheric Newtonian fashion, right? Which is to say, like, I've seen videos where people have had pirate hunts, and don't get me wrong, it's good, it's great, but they're like jousting the whole time. They fly past each other and then they flip around and they fly past each other, and they're just doing these weird sort of oblong bloody routes just around each other over and over and over again. So I choose not to engage in fighting that way, and I want to leverage my cube. So this cube will be able to spin on a fucking dime. So the plan is to always, when you're in an engagement, to have your front facing the enemy no matter what. And the propulsion can be used to potentially get us out of harm's way. So maybe we can try and get rear facing on a fight. Like, we might be able to get to a situation where they can never get their front to face us, which would be ideal. But the idea is that our front always faces them at all times, no matter what. And we strafe for the most part, or maneuver up and down, which is what none of these ships do. They joust. Everyone drives straight forward because it's always about rear propulsion. Now, when we put this to the test, there's probably going to be all sorts of issues with propellants. We might need to put an extra large tank in, because presumably if you're using all of these as hard as you can, because I probably want to strafe as much as this thing physically can, it's probably going to use a lot of propellant. I doubt that these are too efficient when it comes to that. 15 units per second, 27 units per second on the main thruster. So most people would be running a couple of big boosters or whatever, which, you know, maybe they're doing 100 units per second. And if I have all of these singing at once, right, we're going to catch up very quickly, right? And we're sort of trying to leverage that we want to be as compact a fighter as possible. I think the 2 guns would probably be good for symmetry's sake, but there's a scenario where I might come up with a way to fit even more in, maybe 4 or whatever. These bloody gun drums, the ammo drums, are a bit of a pain, and I discussed that I'm going to struggle to put them outside because this symmetry is going to go across the roof as well. So there's not really anywhere I can put the guns, even if I had them hanging off the side of the cube, you know, skirted my rules on being a cube. We might still, you know, you'd still have corrosion problems. So that's where that's at. So yeah, the idea is that every single facing of this is going to be ultra vulnerable, unarmored, except the front, where we're going to build the Ned Kelly assembly. If people don't know who Ned Kelly is, I doubt you don't. Most people, it's the only thing they know about Australia. But he was a bush ranger, bloody, did a lot of robbing, cracked the sads, and he was renowned for making a suit of essentially like plate steel, like just hard armor. You got to appreciate the brute force approach, and you know, the weapons at the time basically could only just ding their bullets off of him, so it was hyper effective. So him and the Kelly gang, they had 4 suits, and they had a little eye slot in the front. So I'm basically going to copy that. So the idea would be, and you know, it's still in its infancy, but if I'm out in space, asteroiding and all that sort of stuff, that's probably enough visibility. There's also hinges, right? There's also you know, the ability to make doors. So there's potentially a situation where I might be able to make this into a door or something that can open up so I can have increased visibility. I probably won't have any out the sides because I'm going to do these walls of thrusters. So this is going to be the weak point, I suppose. It will be the visibility. Potentially, I don't know, maybe I do come up with a better way to increase it around the sides or something like that. Because if I do find myself in combat and I've got this dude jousting around me and all that, it's going to be sort of hard to maintain line of sight. So we're still working on it. And then you've got your plate steel. And honestly, I'm going to fill in every gap, and I'm potentially going to add even more of these onto the front because we will still have centerline thrust symmetry, right? So just front loading this is all it's going to do is demand more thrust, but it's not going to put us off balance terribly. So I might even come up with an assembly that has these beams over and over and over again. I don't know how deep you'd want to go. Practice is going to make perfect, but I'll just put this bloody plate steel. I'll just put more and more and more and more. So that's what I'm sort of thinking about doing. And that's sort of the design there for a little baby fighter. However, like, I could just as easily abandon the entire front as well. The idea of being tiny and moving in a way that most other ships don't understand. Like, if they did figure out what I was doing, that I'm sort of just strafing around, I think the first action of most opposing fighters would be to probably stop jousting, to stand on the brake and try and sit like still like a turret and maneuver, in which case I should probably have the advantage then, because they'll be sitting still trying to get a shot and I'll be able to strafe all over the place. Anyway, it's all theoretical. It's all an interesting thought. There are issues with the design. Like I said, the limited visibility, especially that it's going to be encased, is a huge pain, but it depends how you're going to use it. For this, you'd obviously want to be flying out to the unsafe zone and stirring trouble up, potentially even just to practice. Go start shit with pirates and lose, just to learn the flow of combat. So I'm not 100% sold on that. We may even still just go with an open front one, because this ship's going to be so small, if they get a stray bullet in the guts, then whatever, I'm dead anyway, who cares? But they got to get the stray bullet, don't they? So that's sort of the thought there. What I will do is, let's jump back to what were we working on previously. I think Project Gillette, which was my asteroid thing. I haven't done much work on that currently, but I was going to talk to you about the electricity system that I was talking about just before, right? Because I was experimenting with it, and it can probably help with visual aid, right? So let's see. Right now, I've got a fuel cell in there. No, I don't. Okay, first things first, let's get a fuel cell in there. Rod, I think they call them. So, actually, maybe I don't put it in just yet, because I'll show you the pertinent systems here, right? So I'm looking at the fuel chamber here. It might be easier actually from here. You click on this fuel chamber, and these are its, you know, the guts of it. So you got fuel chamber rate limit and fuel chamber rate. Right, now you can't turn that past 100. That is just a physical limitation. If you want it higher, you're going to need another fuel chamber running in parallel. And this fuel chamber fuel, this will change once we put the fuel rod in there, right? But fuel chamber unit rate, you can in fact put a ceiling on, right? You could, hang on. Oh, no, we can change the rate limit, right? So 100 is the max, but we can change that. And so essentially, once we start putting fuel in, it's just going to tick up one tick at a time until it hits 100, right? And at that point, it's changing the fuel over as efficiently as possible. You guys that have played this have probably figured this out even with the starter ship, that the way that, unless you go out of your way to come up with a system that addresses it directly, your fuel efficiency conversion will grow up, but ultimately your energy waste, like it's not smart enough to stop converting. I've heard that some of the more advanced ships that you can buy have code in them to stop that, but we're essentially going to look at that and potentially build some of that code maybe in future episodes. So yeah, basically it will get up to a point where it's at 100 and it's really aggressively transferring the fuel rod across to energy, but you're probably not using all that energy either. So if you did strain your system pretty extreme in an extreme way, that'd be awesome because you're gonna get that energy back really quick. But for the 99% of the time when you're idling, you're just chewing it up. So here's the generator that turns said fuel into power, right? And that has the same sort of thing: generator unit rate and the rate limit. Now they have a relationship of, I think it's something like 3-to-1. It's not explicitly said, but I've noticed it from practice and trying all this out. So anyway, let's put this to the test. I know this conversation's all very academic and just like, dare I say, philosophical. You know, we're just discussing systems, but the hope is that it gives people some insight. Okay, so we'll go to the fuel chamber, and you can see there it's already started ticking up. You can see it's detected fuel chamber max. What is that? 300,000 units. So that's what that rod has, and you can see it's already started to ticking down. Fuel chamber fuel. So that's the rod being consumed. And it's got a little green light on it as well, or red light or whatever, but presumably when that light is half full is when it's going to be at 150,000 units. And you can see the fuel chamber unit rate is ticking up there, slow and steady, right? It's not really 1 per second. What do you reckon that is? 2, 3, it might be 3-4 seconds, something like that. Anyway, so let's look at the generator. And you can see there, the generator unit rate's going up. And look, it just hit 50. And this is at about 17, right? So yeah, it is kind of 3-to-1. Well, that hit 20. And that's a 60. It is 3-to-1. So there you go. Which actually, you might have already realized this straight away. This thing's going to hit 100. And this thing's going to keep going. So immediately, something that you could probably do with your fuel generator, your fuel, what is this machine called? The fuel chamber, right? You could hotwire this to limit it to 1/3 output, because this is already going to be operating. Look, we're about to hit 100, and this is going to be, well, once it hits 33, essentially, 100. And see that? It stopped. So this generator is producing as much power as physically possible without enhancers or anything like that. So one of your options might be to, oh, well, hang on a sec. Look at that. It actually has had a ceiling. So, I was going to say you could hotwire it and force it to 33 1/3. But it stopped. Okay, cool. So something that we're learning out loud, as well, is that the fuel chamber won't overproduce fuel beyond the generator draw, okay? So the generator now is screaming along at max units, right? And I think it's a multiplier of that as well. So it says it's at a rate of 100, but I think it puts out 10,000 power per second, is it? Or 1,000? Maybe even 100,000, I can't remember. It's a magnitude, obviously, but it's not 100. It's a magnitude of. So my immediate thing from this is to go, okay, interesting. What you would probably want to do is you could put 3 generators on 1 fuel chamber to still get maximum efficiency out of that fuel. But the fact still remains that the amount of draw that, like, say, your boosters are going to do, well, I mean, they're not rigged in or anything like that. Maybe, have I got thrusters rigged in? Max raw fuel? No. That's a hard point. I think I need to detect the thruster. Current thrust. Alright, it doesn't really give you an idea, but you might be able to look at the stat sheet. So what I'm sort of getting at is, okay, good for us. We're not overproducing fuel from the chamber, but we're absolutely overproducing electricity. You know, this thing can only hold, what, 10,000 or something like that? And this thing is just constantly producing electricity, and we're still constantly using fuel. You can see there, it's not stopping, right? So what you could potentially do, I suppose if this throttles off the back of it, what you can do is you could actually throttle the fuel chamber's production, right? Actually, no, it'll be this, right? So we put that to 20, it will actually throttle it to a max, which in turn is going to have a flow-on effect throttle on the generator, right? See there, it won't go past 60. But that is double handling, because what we could ultimately do here is just limit this to 60, right? And this, you could say, go to 100, I don't care, but it won't. You see what I mean? It won't go because the generator holds all. I think maybe the only other time that you potentially would throttle this instead of the generator is if you were running multiple generators off the same chamber. But this is where we come back to what I was talking about for sort of code, all right? So what I'm thinking of doing is putting a YOLO script in that says, that has a relationship with the battery, right? I don't think we're gonna have time to set it up, even though I do have some YOLO on the network. I mean, maybe. What's your name? Battery priority, stored battery power. Stored battery power. Let's give it a quick attempt, okay? So, I can probably delete whatever script I've got in here. Oh wow, why are you so large? Actually, I remember exactly, I accidentally dragged it larger one time because I was clicking on something else. Oh my god, what I should have done is, can you please drag over here, please? Okay, fuck me. What a nightmare. And this is because I was editing something, I accidentally right-click drag this. Right, so this is what your script looks like, and you only get 20 lines, it's not very much. So let's just delete this out. Now, there's no guarantee I'm gonna get this script working, but I'll lay the skeleton groundwork to give you an idea of what we're gonna do here. So we've got the battery here, and what we said was stored battery power, right? So what we want is that output. You could change the name, you could call this Gronk, you could call it whatever, right? But the point is that it has to be word for word the exact same thing. So say we go up to this, we'll get that written in there, right? So you should be able to write, let's say if we said if, let's do an if loop, and I think if you do an if then else, sorry, is what I'm trying to say. If stored battery power is equal to, I think double equals is equal to, but like I said, I'm still getting through it, but my point is to lay this out so you get an idea, right? If it's equal to blah, 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 then we would go, so we won't say 0, we'll say, what's the max? What do you say? Oh, here we go, can hold up to 10,000. That's what we want. If stored battery power is equal to 10,000, as in the battery is full, then it would be the generator that we would throttle. Generator unit rate limit we'd probably say something like generator unit limit. I don't know if you could just go -1. It might be something like that. Or what it might end up being is that we have to do something like set generator unit limit equals generator unit limit -1. Do you know what I mean? So like we take the current value of it and then we subtract 1 from it, right? And then you'd have else. I'm pretty sure you write the if then else all in one line, but I'm just gonna keep throwing up random bits of code. So we'll put an else in, which would be if else then means that the stored power is not at 10,000, in which case we would take this line and we would do that, except we'd go like +1, right? So and then at the end of all that you'd put a bloody, I suppose you could just go to 03 or whatever, right? Now my syntax is probably off. Again, this is like blueprinting a ship. I'm just putting down rough code. It's almost comment code just to give me an idea of what I'm working with. But that should sort of make sense to someone that has an idea of what I'm talking about. Basically, you run the loop, you run it infinitely, and all it does, it checks, is the battery full? Yes. If the answer is yes, cap the generator by 1. Right? If the answer is no, increase the cap by 1, right? It won't be able to go past max. And the point is there, it's going to check it. And especially if we made this code only a couple of lines long, because this it reads at every 0.2 seconds. So say we wrote it 5 lines long, it will hail this system every second, and as long as the battery is full every second, it will basically incrementally cap the generator output down. Maybe it gets all the way down 10, 20, 30 points because we're driving along and we're drawing X power, but then it'll eventually hit a point where the battery has to pick up the slack, and so the battery starts to drop a little bit, at which case it will start to feather it up and down. And that's probably what will end up happening, especially if you have constant draw. You just maybe you're driving out to get to 20 kilometers or something like that. You'll end up with a point where this code is constantly just feathering it at whatever point. I can't tell you what number it's going to be, but it's going to be efficient, and it's basically going to be 100% efficiency, where the battery is just ticking down that 1%, and you're going to be burning your fuel, because then, you know, remember that if this is getting throttled, then in turn that's throttling the fuel production as well. And so from there, that will give you ultimate fuel efficiency. So I found that interesting because like I said, this syntax isn't 100% right, but it is a really basic loop, and I'm pretty certain it will work. Again, this is all theory crafting. I need to find the time to actually do it, but it seemed like you guys enjoyed the last video, so I thought I'd put a bit more theory out there. But again, this isn't a tutorial. I'm not necessarily teaching people the basics, but from what I've seen from the feedback and the comments, I've at least helped nudge people and their mind's eye in certain directions. You know, the creative juices can be slow to get going sometimes, and I'm only one man. I think in squares and cubes and efficiency. I'm not very artistic or anything like that, but I'm a big problem solver, and maybe I think from a slightly different trajectory to you. And by me putting these concepts and ideas out there, that at least maybe gives you a kick on to start thinking about something different. You know, it might spark something in the back of your mind. And I kind of feel like that adds a lot of value. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. I've come up with an idea of, I don't know, building my bloody Ned Kelly attack ship, or my mining ship, or I want to build an efficiency code thing. Coming up with the concept or the project in the first place can be the hardest thing, because that has to appear out of thin air. You have to have inspiration, because now I can go and just figure out how to code this. I can figure out how to build this. That's nothing. Once you're doing the second part where you actually construct and deal with the problem directly, it's kind of a downhill slope, because that's a self-contained problem solve. Excuse me. Oh my god, I nearly made it to the end of the video. No, little cough there at the end. Yeah, so my point is, the hope is that if I go, hey, these are some ideas that I've come up with, it might give you some new ideas yourself. And then once you've got the idea in your head and you've set on it, the rest is easy. The rest is academic. All you have to do is join the dots and solve the problem. But it's like coming up with the problem to solve is the most interesting part to me. Anyway, let me know what you reckon. Again, if you do find this sort of stuff interesting, comments would be appreciated, because this is not exactly your traditional Let's Play. I know that. But yeah, if you're getting value out of this and this is helping you, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear people's ideas and their contributions and thoughts. Yeah, and if it's well received still, I'll keep putting these episodes up. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.